Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, today's episode is going to take a surprising twist. Our guest actually is a very accomplished individual. He's the president and CEO of a company known as Event Business Formula. In fact, he's very, very well known in the event space. He hosts this podcast called the Business of Meetings podcast. For over 2 decades, he's consulted with Fortune 500 companies and produced events, I believe, in more than 50 countries or something like that. So super, super, super accomplished individual, especially when it comes to events and meetings. But that's not why I want to talk to him today. So let's just dive into it. My guest is Eric Rozenberg. He's also the author of the book, Before It's Too Late. So Eric, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much, Charles. What an introduction. This is very kind of you. Thank you.
At some point, one of our conversations, somehow, somewhere, the topic of anti-Semitism came up. And, I'm not Jewish. I'm thinking anti-Semitism. So, what are we talking about here? Jewish jokes? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't know anybody that actually, I don't see anything bad happening. And I hear about people talking about anti-Semitism. So there was that disconnect. There was the wake-up call that I didn't have because I'm like, well, if I don't see it, I don't hear it, then I think, like many people, there's this bubble, this protective layer that we put around ourselves that we go, then it doesn't exist. And even though you shared with me, to some extent, it was not until I met your family. You have a beautiful family. Your mom is amazing. Your wife is extraordinary. Your daughters are just beautiful and wonderful people. But seeing how it's impacted all of you, I was like, oh, God, like I had no idea. And that's how it sort of grabbed me. So explain to me, or explain to our listeners rather, when you talk about anti-Semitism, like what is really going on there?
People will hear it with my accent. They ask me, where are you from? I say South Florida. And then they pause and they go, yeah, but before that. So we moved from Belgium 10 years ago. Even our neighbors at home wouldn't really comprehend exactly what was going on. My kids were going to a Jewish school, first of all, for security reasons, because there's hardly any Jewish kids in the public school system in Brussels anymore. But also, obviously, to learn about our roots and history. But they were going to a school that was protected for 30, 40 years by police with machine guns and private guards. And actually, 6 months after we left Belgium, the army was in front of the school. And that's one of the pictures that I've put in the book. So it's those things that, as you rightly say, if you don't see it, you don't know it, it's not existing. And in the meantime, the way I look at it, obviously, is through the lens of anti-Semitism, being Jewish, but also we are the kind of the canary in the coal mine. If you look in the history of mankind, when Jews have to leave a country, look at what's happening with democracy. And so what we decided to do is, there's always 3 solutions. You lead, you follow, you get out of the way. And I tried to lead. I knew all the top people in the media and in politics, various companies with my work. So I had a corporate events agency at that time. But also I was volunteering for the security of the Jewish community, working with the police, wearing the bulletproof jacket in front of the synagogue and everything. And what the law enforcement were telling me is a totally different story. So at first you kind of really, and then you start connecting the dots and you look at one story and another story and another story. And then you realize there's a thread there and that you have kids and you have to think about the future. That's when finally, after 10 years of speaking with my wife, she was convinced that yes, indeed, there is no future for them. And we decided to move. Now, that's something that you don't do on your own. It was not for the 2 of us who would have never done it. But also it's learning from history, which again, it's another thing that people have issues to do. We talk about the history, but to me, it sounds like we never learned from it. So the same thing with business. You look at the situation, you reach a conclusion, then you have to take a decision. And regardless of your decision, for me, if you come to a conclusion and you don't act on it, then I think there's a problem. And so that's why we decided to act on it and to come to America.
Most of the schools that I've seen here in Florida, there's 1, 2, 3 police officers that are protecting the school. And so, like police, it's common nowadays for police, or I think they call them recreational officers or something like that. But we're not talking about that, are we?
No, it's the tip of the iceberg. Because when you see police with machine gun, heavy arm in front of a building. You're just wondering what's going on there. But it was for every single event of the Jewish community, every wedding. I remember friends that are not Jewish came from abroad for my wedding, and then they look around. I said, "What's going on?" And I said, "What do you mean, what's going on? Eric, have you seen all the police with machine gun around the synagogue?" I said, "Oh yeah, it's normal." That's the situation where you get used to it and you think it's normal, where it's not, absolutely not normal. But to your point, it's not only the school, it's the entire society. The media in Belgium, that especially the French-speaking media in Belgium, there is not 1 week when they will tell a lie about Israel and about the Jews. We had this joke that asked, what is the difference between a Belgian journalist and an Israeli journalist? The Israeli journalist is not obsessed by Belgium. And in Belgium, it was like every week, there's a lot of elements to it. There is the rise of the anti-Semitism was caused by mainly, first of all, the Socialist Party in Belgium that was looking for votes from immigrants. And then it's the rise of Islamism. And here, I just want to make a big difference for all your listeners, because I realize that people don't understand the difference between a Muslim person and an Islamist. All the Islamists are obviously Muslims, but all the Muslims are not Islamists. And Islamism is the political side of it. They have a very definite agenda. They want Sharia law for everyone. And so they start, first of all, intimidating their own. I had friends that suddenly their wives were wearing the veil because they were afraid. They were afraid of the Islamists. And, it started with something and then another thing. And then up to the point now that in the school system in Belgium, if a teacher wants to speak about the Holocaust, he will face most probably a young kid in the classroom standing up, saying it never happened. It doesn't exist.
Mhm.
My parents told me it was all a lie. So again, it's rewriting history, is not learning from it. And you extrapolate and you see what's going on for women in the society, for all the minorities. That's where we come to the conclusion that the way that the leaders in Europe and the media are not speaking up and are complacently keeping silent to remain in power and get votes, obviously has an impact, first of all, on the Jewish population, but then on the rest of the population. I will say they start with the Jews and never ends with the Jews. By the way, I'm very proud of one of the person praising my book is actually Imam Hassan Chalgoumi, who's the president of the Conference of Imam in France, and who is very vocal against Islamism, which, by the way, his family cannot stay with him. And he's protected 24/7. I'm very honored that he praised the book. If you look, that's one of the quotes in the back of the book. But because he's very vocal against the bad people in his own faith, he has to be protected 24/7. And is a very courageous person.
Ultimately, there's going to be good people everywhere and good people ultimately that we can find in every religion. And there's going to be good people that we're going to find in Islam and so forth.
Absolutely.
But it's the bad people that we're really talking about here. And one of the reasons why I thought it was interesting to bring this up is because as CEOs, we have teams. And we have teams of different genders, races, and religions, and the whole deal. And for me, sometimes this is going to sound weird, but sometimes I forget I'm, a white male, right? I don't deal with a lot of the different conflict that so many other people have. Women, just because they're gender, they deal with situations. Obviously, people based on where they're from and the color of the skin, they deal with other situations. Religions, they deal with other situations. Even though your book is really about that anti-Semitism, it actually got me to open up conversations with other people, where I had conversations with a CEO woman of color. And, I wanted to ask her more questions about what it's like for her and what are the struggles for her. I had a conversation with a gentleman, African-American gentleman, who won up the chains of leadership, and asked him questions about the different things that he had to go through and whatnot. There's a old saying, even in sales, that seek to be interested, not interesting. And the more you get interested in the other people's lives and understand them more, it not only makes you a better leader. All in all, I think you bring out the best in people, because sometimes all they need to do is just feel understood. And once they feel understood, then it's like, okay, now you get me. Now I can move on.
People they want to be heard, but they want to be recognized. They want to feel that they belong. And
Mhm.
that's for any type of environment, and starting, of course, with cooperation. And when you have a leader that is taking care of his people or her people, that's where you're making the difference. A lot of people that say our biggest asset is our people, but they don't walk the talk. In the example you gave, when you go to the person and ask that person, how does it feel for you in this situation? That person feel heard and believe that she belongs in that type of environment. And it always starts with that. Just ask the question. The problem is that in this more and more politically correct world where you wake up in the morning and say, "Good morning, America. What are we going to be offended by this morning?" And if you don't
Yeah.
take that approach and just ask the question, there's nothing wrong about asking question. That's how you get to learn, whatever the difference. It's really asking. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is making sure that everyone respect each other. In any companies I've been leading was always the same. Say, I don't care who you vote for. I don't care who you pray to or not. I just want you to be respectful of the colleagues. I want you to tell it the way it is and ask questions when you don't understand. And I want everyone to make sure that our customers are happy. The rest is your private life. And in the meantime is understanding. It's those little things that people appreciate when you really take care of them and genuinely ask them questions, help them grow, and also help them feel good. You're just not going to do a dinner in the middle of Ramadan when you have a colleague that are Muslims, because they cannot eat, so they are immediately excluded. You're not going to have a company meeting the day of Yom Kippur because you're excluding the Jews, and so on and so forth. And you take any minority in any difference and you apply that. And those are 2 or 3 things that are very important for everyone. When you consider that, then you create this environment where people belong and feel respected. It makes all the difference.
If we can suspend judgment for a minute, and if we can suspend judgment on whether the answer is right or wrong, or whether that reality is true, or whether that reality is different from yours, if all you did was have a conversation with somebody and just understand, why do you feel the way that you feel? I've been involved in these conversations before where I am watching this happen and the other person is like, "No, but that's not true. You have to blank." And no, but that's not right. But what happens is now they're no longer seeking to be understood. In other words, what they're trying to do is prove their reality is wrong or the other reality is better or right and whatnot. It's like, no, to be a good leader, sometimes you just need to stop and just try to understand, why do you feel the way that you do?
What you just say is so true and so hard, because that's not necessarily how we are being raised. That's not how we're being taught. And it takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of courage sometimes to do that and to listen to the other person. And in the meantime, having those tough conversations. I always like when people say, we need to be able to have tough conversations. And then when you start having them, boom, everything goes ballistic. Say, no, you're not ready to have tough conversation. And the same way I say, that's what I say to my kids. You cannot have selective indignation. I give them the example. I'm what people in the LGBTQ plus community call a straight ally. And I will always speak up. And I will always tell my friends in that community, why don't you speak up when the Dyke March is kicking out 2 Jewish lesbians that are wearing the colorful flag with the Star of David on it? I'm the first one to speak against any type of racism and stand up with my friends, African American. But in Belgium, we call it Black people because that's how they call themselves. There are a lot of people from Zaire in Brussels. But I tell my kids what it means in America to be Black and what it means driving while Black. And because all my African American friends have told me that the conversation they have with their child is not about protecting themselves when they have sexual relations, or no, it's about, if the police stop you, don't run, put your hands. It's insane. Yeah. So my kids are fully aware of that. In the meantime, I'm also telling my friends in the African American community, Louis Farrakhan is a racist, and the leadership of Black Lives Matters I consider them as anti-Semite because they're supporting BDS, who's an organization who want to get rid of Israel and the Jews. So you see that there is, to me, no selective indignation. If you have your principle, your human principles, your human values, you apply them across the board, and not yes in this case and not in that case. And you transfer that into a leadership in a company. The way you treat people should be the same in the way of accepting certain things and not accepting other things. It should not depend on the people. If you have your values, you apply the values across the board.
In your book, over on chapter 11, you talked about Parkland. And soon after you moved into the United States, you went from a situation in Belgium where people wanted to kill you to then now you're in Parkland. And then your daughter's in school and you get a phone call that there's been a mass shooting and that people have died.
Yeah.
In this particular case, the way that you explained to me the difference in the individuals, because I asked you, I'm like, oh man, now you leave Belgium, you come over to the United States and you dealt with this. Did it make you question whether or not you were in the right country? The way that you responded was interesting to me too.
Never questioned that. Several things. So we moved in July 2013. On the 14th of February 2018 was the shooting in the school. My eldest one called me and she said, Dad, I don't know what's going on. We're evacuating the school for the second time today. But this was not an exercise, obviously. Please don't come now. It's okay, obviously. And I was lucky I was not traveling. I jumped into my car, I was there before the SWAT, and we know what happened. And afterwards, I had people from Belgium that were telling me, you see, you left Belgium to the safety of your kids, and here you go, they almost died, blah, blah, blah. And first of all, I told them, how could you even make that comparison or kind of rejoicing? And if it helps you reassure yourself because you didn't have the balls to leave, so be it. But it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Obviously, we can talk about the reason, about the Promise program and whatnot, and what was not done, and all the signs that were not taken into consideration what was going on. And there is an issue, obviously, with guns in schools and stuff like that we can talk about. There has never been a doubt. Listen, the United States are not a perfect country. There is not one country in the world which is perfect. And that's what I told you, to me, is the greatest country on earth.
Yeah.
Because of all the possibilities, because there's a lot of extremism left and right, like everywhere, but there's a lot of people in the center who have the values which I like, which are respecting each other, which are entrepreneurship, which is building and defending freedom, which is essential for me.
Yeah.
And so that has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And I told my kids, the next day, my eldest one asked me, Dad, if anything would have happened to me, would you still be saying that we're safer here? And I look at her, and a tough question. And I said, listen, we're very lucky that you're not one of the victims. And for your mom and I, there is no doubt that as Jews, we're safer in America, but there's not one safe place in the world. That doesn't exist. And what I learned also from that, and somehow there's a parallel that can be made with business and with leading teams and cooperation. Usually people will pick misery over uncertainty. And I realized that a lot of my friends that are Jewish, that were somehow not criticizing us, but telling us that we are overreacting, it's not that bad, actually don't say that anymore. They're telling us that we left on time, or they have left already Belgium and Europe.
Explain what that means. Most people would choose misery over uncertainty. Explain that.
So, you know the story of the lobster cooking or the frog cooking, where you put in a lobster or a frog in the cold water. But basically, you put it in the cold water, they don't move. And then you put 5 degrees and they still don't move. They get used to it. And then you put another 5 degrees and they still don't move. They are still getting used to it. And by 5 degrees, finally they fall asleep and you cook them. And what had been happening in terms of anti-Semitism in Belgium and in Europe the last 40 years, and I explain all the reason why and everything, but the point was it was always one thing after the other, one little thing after the other. And if 10 years before, when we moved even here, I would have told you that 5 years later, a teacher will be beheaded in the street of France because he was showing the caricature of Charlie Hebdo to his students, you would have said, Eric, come on, you're exaggerating. And that's what happened. Samuel Paty was beheaded because of that. So Why I say misery over uncertainty. Misery is you're not happy. And there's always something.
Wow.
And there's always something. But you don't move. You stay in the team where you have a very bad leader who's a dictator, bad leader, period. But you stay there because you don't know what else you could be doing. And you might be frightened that if you leave that job or if you leave that company, you might not find something else. And the point that I was making about the situation in Belgium is that a lot of my friends kept saying, it's not that bad. You were reacting. And then one thing, and then another, and then another, and then another. And until when? So that's what I call misery over uncertainty. Uncertainty is what we did. We left. We came here on investor's visa, start developing a business, but I had not one client before moving.
Yeah.
Work hard. I had built a network before, so I was hoping that I will find work to do, which is exactly what happened. And then I was lucky to be recognized as extraordinary ability, and that led us to become American. I'm very proud of that. But it was total uncertainty. And the same thing now. I left the company. I opened a SaaS business in the US and Latin America for 4 years. I left in very good terms because I wanted to acquire small business, but I don't know which small business I'm going to acquire. So there's a lot of uncertainty over there. And the parallel is that I do with people friends that I have at corporations is that they don't have a great leader. They don't like what they're doing, but they stay there because they don't know what else might happen. And so that's why I say people will choose misery over uncertainty.
How has your experiences in Belgium made you a better CEO?
Interesting question.
Because I do believe that every challenge comes with it an equal and opposite opportunity. And so somehow, somewhere, this has made you a better CEO and a better leader.
Great question. Thank you. I really think it's two things over here. The first one is, as you say, every challenge, you learn something. Good thing, bad thing, you never know what can come out of it. So it's the mindset of learning why you were not happy or what worked well and trying to replicate that. And the second thing I really believe is being clear and transparent with people when you have challenges, whether it was during the subprime crisis and we had less client with the corporate development agency, or whatever the situation you have your mindset, but you also have the transparency with people, telling it the way it is. What is the situation with the business? How is this going? So that all comes back to really taking care of people and making sure that people understand why they are working with you. What is the goal of the company? What is the purpose that they have there, and what you're trying to achieve? And repeating and repeating and repeating. So I never take anything for granted. I'm very grateful of being able to be in America and doing business here. And I think that for me is what is most important is being able to work with people that share the same values and they want to come together to build a business.
And you said earlier in our conversation, there are three ways to make change: you lead, follow, or leave. And the same thing is whether you're part of any corporation as a CEO or leader, or just, if you're, an employee of the company, you can either lead and try to make change, follow, or leave. For our listeners here, this is a far different conversation than you probably even imagined that we were going to have here today. But for me, I feel like I have a moral and ethical obligation to bring conversations, even if they're tough, to our listeners, especially when I feel like it can make a very positive impact. And for some of you, you didn't even need to hear this conversation because you understand it. You live it every single day. If you're like Eric or any number of people who are going through their own different challenges. And then there are some others that just needed this as a reminder. And, then others that, as Susan Collins said, the wake-up call for the rest of us. So whichever it was for you, I hope you found value in today's conversation. Eric, if people want to learn more about you, read your book or whatnot, where do we send them?
So the book is called Before It's Too Late, a love letter to my daughters in America. And that can be found on Amazon, on every type of format, even on Audible with my accent. Best way to reach me is LinkedIn. So it's Eric with the C and Rozenberg with the Z. I'm always happy to connect with people. And then again, people don't have to agree with me, but now I'm not having those conversations until they've read the book, because there's also 175 links and reference. So it's a lot of facts that are there. And I want to thank you, Charles, for not only the friendship and the conversation that we had, but for opening your platform to this type of conversation, which I believe are crucial for our country. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, my friend. All right, so that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. This is Charles Gaudet with my friend Eric Rozenberg, and I will see you in another episode.